Hi, my name is Chris Koneski. I'm the editor of the Des Moines Business Record. We're here today to talk a little bit about STEM education in Iowa and the impact on business. And to do that, we've gathered a group of panelists today to talk about what's already being done, what can be done, and some of the issues that are facing the state. The format is a bit like our Power Breakfast if you've done those, if you've been to those before. But we wanted to kind of make it a little bit more informal and have a discussion. And actually, one of the things we do before our Power Breakfast is have a pre-event meeting where we gather all the panelists together. And we've always thought that discussion is some of the most lively discussion, and we always wish we could have our audience be a fly on the wall for that. So that's what we're going to go for today. I'm going to adjust the camera now, and from just about this point forward, we won't be looking at you. And we're going to have a discussion amongst ourselves. Our reporter Kyle here is going to be writing a story after the fact as well. So thanks for joining us, and with us today are Jeff Well. He's the Executive Director of the Governor's STEM Advisory Council. We have Mark Putnam. He's the President of Central College. Teresa Whaley. She's the Director of Iowa Workforce Development. Gary Schulten, the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Principal Financial Group. And Alyssa Jordan, Director of R&D at Keyman Industries. And now I'll turn it over to Kyle Oppenheisen. He's been with us for just about 3 years, and he covers tech and innovation, economic development, HR and education, and transportation, and everything else that kind of falls underneath those categories. So, Kyle, you want to take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming in this morning. I think this should be a great discussion, a relevant topic. So, when you talk about STEM, there seems to be a lot of momentum around the topic right now. A lot of people are talking about it. We mentioned the advisory council put together by Governor Branstad. My first question to all of you, and we'll go around the room starting with Jeff, why is STEM such a critical issue right now?
STEM is a moral and economic imperative. I think for the innovation economy that Iowa has worked so hard to build, it counts on a talent pipeline, and the STEM Education Initiative is about infusing that pipeline with talent. That's its economic imperative. Its moral imperative is that there's a STEM literacy expectation among Iowans that as consumers, grocery stores and pharmacies and leisure decisions and travel decisions and at the voting booth and as parents, that our citizens have a strong foundation in STEM literacy. So on both those fronts, I think that's why there is a STEM initiative.
Teresa?
I would say STEM is important in today's world economy because of the foundation in critical thinking skills. So no matter what a person chooses to do with their life or field of expertise or opportunity, it's really important in order to be successful that we start very early in a person's life to embed and ingrain the importance of critical thinking kinds of skill sets, and then that can flourish into whatever the interest levels are, whether it be in technology or science or art or geography. There's just a fundamental foundation people need to have in today's world economy, and that foundation is built on critical thinking skills.
Gary?
Well, I absolutely agree that it's an economic imperative for not only the state, but the country as well. And there are many ways of measuring it, I think, that are valid, but the one that I like the best comes from the principal's chief economist, Bob Bauer. And he talks about the fact that the only way the next generation will have a higher standard of living than the current one is through innovation. And innovation is driven by STEM. It's driven by technology to a large extent and other parts of STEM, and all of that is dependent upon having a workforce to be able to drive that. So at the bottom, it's at the bottom of the whole pyramid of why we need to do this. It's about providing a better standard of living for the next generation.
Absolutely. And Alyssa?
I would completely agree with that. I think the other thing that is so important that several other people have mentioned is we live in a global society now. We're not just Iowa, we're not just the U.S. We live in a global community, and in order to be competitive in a global community, these need to be basic skills that we all have. And not only do you use them in your everyday life and to make your quality of life better, but to be innovative and competitive, we need to have these skills as a basis of everything.
As an educator, I think I hear the two themes we always talk about. And that is that there is a global competitiveness dimension that really does matter a lot to us. But there's also the individual achievement that is part of it. And I think the conversation is somewhere between the two. That though sometimes it's overstated, and people use apocalyptic terms about American global competitiveness, there is still a relevance of how we are positioned now and into the long term. And STEM education plays a critical role in how we understand global competitiveness. The other side of that is this notion of how we educate people today. And what society are we preparing them for? So as someone in higher education, I often think about 8th graders. And what are we doing right now with 8th graders that I have to be prepared for in 5 years in the college context in order to be sure that we are prepared to advance them going through? I think the challenge we face is that our notions of global competitiveness and our preparation of students are beginning to diverge and create wider gaps as science and technology advances at a pace that is faster than what we are able to keep up with at the moment.
I thought the apocalyptic, what did you say?
Yeah, sometimes global competitiveness, you read an article from a journalist that'll describe the end of American civilization or the economy is about to collapse.
Sure.
I think those apocalyptic dimensions are not particularly helpful because it tends to polarize the discussion. The middle of this is how do we really understand the difference that exists now and let's say 30 years ago in STEM education? Because if we're understanding this in context, the disciplines themselves have been advancing at such a rate that we often don't talk about that side of the gap. We want to say the students are not performing these days at the level we would like to see, and there's truth in that. But it's also the case that the expectations of science disciplines, where I have to live, in imagining where these disciplines are going as a college president, they are advancing at rates that are astronomically fast. And so there is a dimension that is part of the fields that we are interested in, that we have to understand and begin to cope with, because industry's expectations are being raised because of the advances of humanity with respect to science. And so, my biology class in high school would not be adequate today in any case because of where biology has moved as a life science.
And just to add on to that, principal of a global company, so I get a chance to interact in our mostly emerging markets. So, India, Brazil, China, Chile, Mexico. And it is absolutely the case that the U.S. has an innovation advantage. We are far ahead. I think the challenge that we have is how long will we maintain that innovation edge if we don't have the innovators coming up through the system. So I think we're building on a place where we have an advantage. We just need to keep it.
How does Iowa fit into that? I mean, as the U.S. as a whole, how does Iowa compare maybe to other states in the United States?
Well, there's several different fronts. Iowa, I think, has a great educational system, both at the K through 12, but also at the university level. And so, we have many people that come here to be educated. And part of the issue is that they're coming from another country, they might not be able to stay because there's not a way for them to stay. But I think we have a really good relationship between businesses and our university and college system. So that we can help to drive new innovation. We have incredible innovation in the technology field happening in the state. Many new startups coming directly from our university system. I'm sure Kevin sees some of that too.
Yeah, we see that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm curious about status of workforce. I read something recently that suggested national workforce in STEM fields is about 6%. But you made the point earlier about preparation of people, as well as what Jeff said, of a lifestyle that requires STEM. So I'd be curious about how you see the pipeline across the board, even as I sit in one part of it.
I see it as very challenging because if you go back 30 years or longer, there was that expectation that you certainly would have a better quality of life than the previous generation if you, quote, went to a 4-year school or a 2-year school after high school. And that was kind of an elite opportunity, that if you could really apply yourself and be one of those that could reach the end of the rainbow, that expectation was out there. But as the world moved so quickly in development and innovation and technology and entrepreneurship, you think of the educational differences. And what I see is that we really need to have this skill, this underlying critical thinking skill in people, embedded in people, even who are not going to have perhaps an opportunity right away after high school for more formal education, but have a great opportunity for a wonderful salary and quality of life, depending on what their interest level is. And I can give you an example. We were recently in Sioux City and visiting with a 16-year-old sophomore in high school. Now, remember that for yourselves, where you were in your thought processes when you were 16. And we said to her, what do you think you'd like to do? And of course, she had no idea. But she liked to build things. And like birdhouses and things around the house and kites, and that was one of her most favorite things to do. And we always tell people how great it is if they can find a career within their likes of what they like to do, whether it be with their hands or their subject matter. And so we were going through our Skilled Iowa process, and said she went through the certification process. And after that was over and we had the results of her critical thinking skills, we said, what do you think this is really telling you? Because her most difficult result was in applied mathematics. And she said, well, it tells me that if I really want to follow this opportunity of making things, whether it be, and we said whether it's architecture or welding or brain surgery or research, building things can mean a lot of different things. But you have to have that underlying thought process, and she was challenged. What was great for her is that we were not her parents, we were not her counselors, we were not her teachers. We were just people from the outside world coming in and saying, listen, no matter what you choose to do, because of what your likes are, what you like to do with your spare time, you really need to start thinking about building a foundation so that wherever you choose to go, that you do have the opportunity to do the best and proceed from that into a career. So we have all sorts of stories like that, and I see we're working very hard with the existing workforce. But what we really saw as a gap was in the K through 12. I can only influence down to the 9th grade, really. And so that's why it was so important for us to move the Skilled Iowa initiative into high schools, so that high school students now, for the first time, have immediate feedback as to what a business person might say, and can track their progress as many times as they want, at no cost to them. So we're really trying to infiltrate people in their critical thinking foundational skills earlier than ever before. It's a scary thought when you think that the generations we're talking about never knew a world without the verb Google. And think of where we came from. It was all brand new things for us. Many times students pull teachers through that pipeline because they have such a natural ability for those kinds of technologies now, whereas many of the teachers and many of the parents and counselors knew a world without all this technology, and really it's for the benefit of the next generation to be so at ease with what opportunity really is. It's a great thing to watch.
I think it's interesting when you talk about that K through 12. I think so much when I'm not that far removed from that. So it seems like you do all the assignments and you do the work, and feels like a lot of times you never get that. You don't have somebody coming in and saying, well, this is why you need to know what
Right.
calculus is.
Correct.
You know, so you can sit there and you do the work. I was able to do the work, but I never, I
Right.
did well at math, but it wasn't something for.
Right. And that's the beauty of.
I didn't know what I was supposed to use it for. It was kind of how.
That's the beauty of even in the earlier grades to actually show an application where you can use it. The STEM projects really do that at a very young age, which obviously a lot of us never had the opportunity to do. But in high school especially, even if they get a part-time job, in the summertime or whatever, and for the parents as well, it's very helpful to see the application, immediate application, and what the possibilities could be with a little more effort in some things. It's not that difficult. They're still at such a great learning age, molding age, that that's what business, I think, is yearning for. From my history in business, is someone that has the foundational skills and the ethical skills. Business can do wonderful things with that in the workforce. It's when we forget that foundational skill process that business runs into great difficulty filling their opportunities within their companies.
One thing you touched on with that, and I think this is a question, especially for Gary, you talk about the foundational blocks that STEM can build for you. And when I think of principal, I don't necessarily think of a STEM company, science, technology, engineering, math. In some ways it is, but that's just not my first mental image. And all of you feel free to jump in, but why is the idea of STEM important to a company like Principal that you might not think of right away as a STEM company?
Yeah, it's a great question. So why am I spending my time on the Governor's STEM Advisory Council and having discussions like this? Why is Larry Zimpelman advocating for it and that sort of thing? So yeah, it's not obvious to people that Principal is a STEM company. But let's just throw a couple pieces of data to help illustrate that. So when we went public in 2001, about almost 60% of our employees were transaction processors, and 40% were knowledge workers. And now we sit with about 70% of our employee base in Iowa are knowledge workers, and only 30 are transaction processors. So the reason that happened is kind of twofold. One is we're automating much of that transaction processing work, so we don't need as many employees on that front, but we're growing on the other side. So that big growth group in that knowledge workers, so that 70% of our workforce, half of them are STEM, with about 35 to 40% being technology related, information technology workers, and the others needing advanced math skills for investment analysts, finance analysts, and those sorts of things. So it's a critical issue for us. Not only is it over a third of our employee base in total are STEM related, but it's the fastest growing part. So we're going to need more in the future. And then when we look at where we are now, a third of our STEM related workers will be eligible to retire within 10 years. So we have growth happening there, the fastest growth. We're going to have to replace, and there's just not enough coming out of the system to fill that. And on top of that, Iowa is being seen as a destination to get great workers. And so we're competing with more companies for that smaller and smaller pool, and it's a critical issue to us. So it is a business critical issue to a company like the Principal.
I would like to challenge a little bit some of those statements, because I think every company is a STEM company. Whether you're in advanced manufacturing, agriculture, science, biosciences, it doesn't. Whether you're the garage door company owner, because I think what STEM does, it's not about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's about teaching logical, problem-solving abilities in a person. And the sooner and the earlier you can do that with a person to help them develop their critical thinking skills. Every company that I know of is a STEM company. So the mistake we make is thinking that it's only science, technology, engineering, and math. That's a mistake. Because it is art and literature and geography and all the other skills, social skills, that people need in their lives to be a broad person. But you can go to the field of art and you can find STEM all over art, because it takes geometric skills, it takes a logical thinking process as to how to develop the object perhaps that you're developing. The mistake that we will make, if there are any mistakes at all, will be in funneling so tightly the S, the T, the E, and the M that we cannot see very broadly that this application of critical thinking is pervasive no matter what we are doing.
I think that's a great point, Teresa, and I would add to it. So roughly 40% of our employees are from one of the STEM disciplines. The other 60% need to be knowledgeable about STEM. How can you be in a financial services company and not have basic math skills? So you can explain to others what the products are that we offer. So you can even do your own personal financial planning. You have to have basic understanding of math to be able to do that. So all of our employees need to have a base level of STEM, not just those that are in a STEM job.
I would agree as well. I mean, Kemin is a science company, but we have lots of departments that don't directly deal with that. However, on the other hand, they have to be critical thinkers. And so oftentimes what I tell my employees, you're here because of your brain, because you can think. It's not even just the knowledge base. It's because you can think and solve problems. And it's from the guy working in the manufacturing facility all the way up to the PhD level doing research on the bench every single day. Those critical thinking skills are the key to success.
Now, we look at it from the point of view of higher education. We have alumni from Central College, both at Principal and at Kemin. So you can think about, from my point of view, what do I have to do to prepare? Now, I've got to anticipate the 8th graders, kids who are coming up, be positioned in order to create this pivot or this transition that is a discoverable process for a student. Most students who come into colleges and universities still do not know what they want to do eventually with their life and career. Most change their major. They all are exploring and trying to figure it out, to the frustration of their parents. But what you find is that the inquiry itself, the pursuit of knowledge and that interest, is what drives so much of what can be yielded on the back end of this. And so we value experiential learning very highly to get students into internships, into settings in which they can practice and apply theory. They may be, in fact, in a major, or they're double majoring in some humanities area or social science, but at the same time they have interests around environmental science or sustainability that bridges these gaps. So from my point of view, I think that's the challenge for higher education, but the lower education context as well, Jeff, where you come out of, is seeing this same pull of a spreading gap, and I'm kind of interested in how does that manifest itself in what you have observed.
Great question. Imagine a graphic that hangs on my wall. STEM is the acronym. Is actually underneath an umbrella of another acronym, IDEAS. IDEAS being innovation, design, exploration, and art. And you're absolutely right, Teresa. We need to make sure that this is a comprehensive, holistic initiative rather than one pigeonhole to a particular industry sect. But what business, to your point, doesn't value inquirers, collaborators, critical thinkers, interdisciplinary thinkers, inventors, the creative, all of which are hallmarks of a strong STEM education, all of which make up that K-8, K-12 mosaic of programs that we are rolling out. And I might add a fourth dimension to that. It's a connection to the real world, industry, and applications. To your point, why the calculus matters, why graphing matters, why balancing equations matters to the real world is the missing component that I think our STEM initiative is bringing to the K-12 milieu.
So we had an input from a company from northern Iowa who was an optometry company, and not a large company, maybe 20 people max. And the owner of this company sends me this email and says, here's why this is so important. Because when I hire people into my business, of course the technology has been changing rapidly, and so I need somebody to just read the numbers off the machine and no longer calculate the I issues themselves. But more importantly, the churn in my business is way down because I'm using the certification process. I already know I have critical thinkers coming into my business, and so my churn expense has gone way down to almost 1% or less. So you think of a different kind of application for STEM and critical thinking. It's the fact that in all of our businesses, churn is the worst thing ever because of retraining and restarting employees again. Most companies, the lower they can get their churn rate on employees, that's a huge expense. I can remember from the communications industry, we were always so proud that our churn was so low because that's such a large expense for companies. And so here, out of nowhere, we get letters like this fellow saying, people are ready then to come into the workforce. They have ideas for my small little company, and I can depend on them. More than ever, what businesses tell me is they need people they can depend on. And that means businesses need people who show up every day at 8 o'clock, who know that they work 40 hours a week, whatever that hourly process is, if they have flexible hours or not. And they're dependable with the outcome of their work. You wouldn't think those are such difficult things, but they're very difficult today. I probably get 20 calls a day from business who say, whether it be an internship or some new people coming in the door, it's, well, you know, I just need people to show up at 8 o'clock. And so how do you teach that in the second grade? Well, the way you teach that is a logical thinking process. That's why we have such structure in our early education processes, that at 10 o'clock you have math class, at 11 o'clock you have history, and so on. And it's that process of structure and thinking your way through the day, and then your day is over at a certain time. But more than ever, the workforce needs to understand that that's an automatic expectation business has. It's not that, okay, you can come in and try it for a couple of weeks and we'll be fine. No, that's not the world we're in anymore. There's not that great selection of workers out there anymore that businesses have. So in Iowa, we've rapidly advanced from the issues of recessionary times to the issues of we're close to being fully employed. That means every single one of our business is critical to be able to get the skill sets and people that apply for jobs.
So I keep coming back to where I sit and what I sometimes think of as minding the gap
Yes.
between the employer side and what
Yes.
comes out of lower education and as it comes to our tables. And part of the challenge is, I imagine this continuum that where we move from being very dependent learners to completely independent learners. This is the point that you were making.
Yes.
How do you show up on time? How do you get an assignment done? These are life skills that we teach, you know, at the lowest grades and the disciplines that come along with it. And then the task over time, if we've done it well, is to create an independent learner. So in these contexts, in principal and in chemin, that knowledge worker has a capacity as a learner that is self-replicating as we go through. That's how I imagine what I should be doing in the experience of the higher education context. What sometimes we run into is a reductionistic view, going back to science, technology, engineering,
Correct.
math, or that we believe that we can take all this online and do it on the cheap. Pumping students through, online courses or something, and that's going to get it done. Because what I hear too often is a dissonance between what we expect students to be able to really do and how they need to be prepared to do that versus sometimes what we want to do on the cheap. I'd be curious to know from your perspective, as you receive people out of the higher education context, typically, or the high school context for that matter, for the various ranges of workers, of how that preparation works and doesn't work if we're trying to avoid churning.
I thought it was interesting you brought up critical thinking thing is just so. I always say you go to first grade and you just you move to the next class and you do the assignments, and as long as you do the bottom line work, and even when you get to college, it's as long as you do the work and study, you can get the grade that you need to get the actual degree. And if you use journalism as our case, we wouldn't have had a chance to be successful in journalism if we hadn't been involved in. We worked at the Iowa State Daily up there, where you're making all the decisions you have to make in the real world, having to do the problem solving type thing. And yet, when we graduated, we lined up with all the other journalism students, and I mean, there were more students graduating than I had ever seen. I was editor-in-chief there at the Daily, and I hadn't even seen those people.
Well,
And it just really it makes you wonder.
The other thing that's really difficult is that I tried to explain to a variety of groups is that a student with a Bachelor of Arts degree in anything, I don't care what it's in, is going to have a much more difficult time finding a career-oriented job in today's world in Iowa than a welder out of high school can start. A welder who goes through that vocation, I mean, we have lost the sense of how important vocational or tradesmanship used to be in the past. A welder going through maybe a 6-month specific trades welding class after high school can start earning $70,000 to $80,000 a year. A Bachelor of Arts person will be lucky to find a $35,000 job a year. And so, in some ways, our whole world around how we have taken the industrial vocational training out of high school, for some reason, why that was done, we've made a situation for ourselves because that is really valuable career training that we used to have. I mean, I hate to date myself, but since I'm in the paper, I guess it's already dated. In my day, we actually had shop class in high school still. And the tradespeople I work with every day are yearning for people that have had some of that real experience. And they're great careers. I mean, they're wonderful careers. And so we've done a bit to ourselves, I guess, along the way in the last 30 or 40 years with the educational model that we've chosen to use. For whatever reasons, you could probably talk to that more, but that's a real, if there's one thing we could do, it's try to figure out ways we can put that back into our process in education that we took out so many years ago.
Yeah, one size does not fit all.
No.
And so I think when we set aspirations in front of students and parents, for that matter, of what societal expectations are, there's something beyond the job that comes into it, which is kind of a social imprimatur.
Mm-hmm.
So to have the Bachelor of Arts is sort of a way of entering into an element. It's a ticket of society. It's a rite of passage for some. It's an expectation of families in many respects. If we were actually able to look at this from the point of view that said, what is the goal we're trying to achieve here, then there would be greater possibility of thoughtfully guiding students through an array of things. I had shop class when I was growing up, and so I made a buzzer about that big, and it never turned out to be my career, but I still value the buzzer.
Absolutely.
Because but I saw some buzzers in that group that really wowed me, and I know those folks went on and had successful experiences, and I went and majored in philosophy of all the ridiculous things. But what you end up with, I think, is a question of we have to avoid a setting in which everything becomes the same approach, and if we can explore and embrace the richness of diversity in educational and workforce training opportunities, something profound can happen in society, and I think that's the goal. We can all work toward together.
Both this said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. I was just going to bring it back to what Chris said. When you were in school, you were on the paper and you learned to deal with those challenges. It's experiential. So bringing back things like shop, does it have to be shop? Could someone go out and participate in a company and work with a business?
Or in a trade.
In a trade, right. I mean, that's, I think, the students that come to Kemet, when they come, science is okay, and then they're challenged, and then they go through an experience, and they have to figure out problems, and at the end of the time that they're there, they think, science is cool, maybe I do want to be a scientist, or whatever the case may be, but you have that experience, and it also makes it relevant. So where the relevancy comes in, why I need to know math, why I need to be able to read well and understand what I've read and things like that.
I think Central does something. You guys have a class during the summer, or not a class, but for high school students. I believe?
Yeah, Upward Bound. We've
Yeah.
had it since the mid-1960s.
Yeah.
And part of that focuses on science and math and how people can be prepared in these career fields. But we do a lot of things that we're trying to, it's this minding the gap notion. How many places can we stand at this pivot moment? And so we reach back in by Upward Bound and educational talent search and student support activities that we do that are federally funded. And at the same time, we're running a workshop for teachers to learn how to teach statistics, because here's a whole new area that really has not been an intense part of the curriculum, but it matters in these two industries immediately. What happens if a high school student can have a statistics class? And so a lot of our math teachers were not trained in teaching statistics, and so now we offer a seminar for math teachers out of the college that can help them develop that curriculum. Or the other thing we hear very commonly is there's no computer science curriculum available in a high school setting. They can take an application course or a software course, but it's not the same as taking computer science. And so we'll have students who are brilliant come in and want to major in computer science or physics or some of these fields that we have very strong programs in historically. And they'll come in and say, you know, phew, I didn't know if I could do this or if I would like it because I had no experience with it before I got here. So now we're working with the school districts in our area to teach a course in introductory computer science on the high school level, because we have to build that in, especially with the kinds of industries that we're seeing now, particularly in Iowa. That if we don't get computer science instruction into the lower levels, we're not going to be bridging the gap, and we'll be stretching farther and farther in the college and university context.
And the great thing, I guess the great opportunity from my experiences in working real heavily with the trades and vocational folks like I've done in this past year, they're willing to come in to high school. They're begging to come in to high schools and say, let us show you this or that or the other thing, because it's not your dirty fingernails trade anymore. You know, it's very scientific and it's very regimented as to critical thinking skills. So the great opportunity, I think, for us is to think of ways that we can use our existing talent with people like us, the trades people, all the middle skill people, and allow them to come in and show the class or teach the class or participate with high school students as much as they can, so they really have the experience of real life in what their opportunity is.
And that's a great place for business and education to come together. So your computer science example is a great one. You know, most high schools do not have someone who's qualified to teach a computer science course. So one of the STEM scale-up programs is from Technology Association of Iowa's HyperStream program, where it matches up a business with a high school. So principal has people working not only with the students, but the teachers at Dallas Center Grimes High School to help them learn about how it's applied in actual practice and to help guide them. So the students get some exposure to it and some education in it, so they can help decide, is this something that I want to pursue? And also to learn there's lots of different avenues you could take in computer science. You know, it's not, you know, kind of what our fathers, you know, our parents' version of computer science. This is, you can, if you're into music, you can use it in music. If you're into whatever, and the experiential learning, you know, that's such a critical thing. And you know, when we look at employees, if they don't have experiential learning in their background, they can have the best grades in the world. We're not going to look at them very strong, because there are opportunities. Colleges and universities create great opportunities for them. They can do it on campus, and so most have some of that. And the place where we see that maybe people don't have enough, it's in group settings.
Right.
So how do you collaborate? How do you work as a part of a work group? That's where maybe we see, you know, some people not having the skills, you know, that are really necessary. And just final thought on that. I speak with a lot of computer science professors and heads of computer science departments and students, And they always ask me, what languages should I learn in computer science? And my answer is, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
Because there'll be
If
a
you-
new one by the time you're out
Yeah,
there.
Critical thinking, if you
Right.
prove that you can learn a language,
Yeah,
it doesn't take
yeah.
anything to learn the next language. But if you can't apply it to the situation, then you can know a hot language and it's not going to do you any good.
And that's the independent learner coming
That's
through.
exactly right.
If I may, in the last
Yeah.
5 minutes, we bottled up the crux of the challenge and we brushed up against the solution, right? I'm sitting here listening to what I consider symptoms of what you called an astronomical chasm. Chasm may not have been, I remember astronomical between the K-12 and industry and workforce, and to some degree post-secondary. It's the lack of experiential learning in too many instances, cooperative learning experiences, statistics, computer science, in your case, applications and critical thinking. These are attributes of a quality K-12 preparation, but they're not ubiquitous. And they're not ubiquitous because the education system has been allowed to progress at an arithmetic rate, whereas I think industry progresses at an exponential rate. And to your point, Teresa, bringing business and school together solves this. It's an opportunity for folks like you to be in a room with the school principal or the teachers to say, good heavens, do you understand the value of computer programming? I realize it's not happening in your school, but it's what's happening in the world. And for many educators, by my experience, these are wake-up calls that they welcome. But it's all too rare currently that K-12 decision makers and educators get to mingle with folks like you so that they do shift their curriculum and their emphases.
Can I give you an opportunity as well? With the Governor's STEM Council, what are some of the programs that you're doing to try to get that experience in the schools and to get businesses and K-12 educators working together?
Oh my gosh, numerous. The Scale Up initiative mentioned by Teresa, 9 exemplary STEM programs are rolling out across the state, each of which is required before being awarded that status to demonstrate that it connects teachers with industry. Many, like HyperStream, extremely purposeful. Others are a little bit more nascent at that effort. But we'll be rolling out this winter an IT Academy that brings Microsoft tools to the schools for applications to industry needs, such as Excel spreadsheets. Remarkable how rare Excel training is in a high school, given how often I know it's relied upon in a world of industry. And you know, probably the most critical or instrumental aspect of the Governor's STEM Council uniting business and schools is through the network of regional managers and advisory boards that prominently feature a mandate that the business sector and schools are united. So these folks are catalysts. They're working across the state today, somewhere, I'm sure, uniting K-12 with higher education, with the business sector, with local government, and that's a chief use of their time.
Not as a huge plug for what you're doing, but you know, I have had business people approach me about the initiative and the hubs and how do we get connected. We want to work with the students. To go online, to go to the website, to find your hub, contact the person, you can get something set up. You want to make a difference in your community. You may not be principal where you can, you know, invest tons and tons of money. It might be more like a
Principals
Kemet or
can't always
something.
invest.
I'm just saying maybe a more involved program. Even a little bit helps if you have 1 or 2 people that can go
it does.
and participate. And there are companies that want to do that. I've had several people approach me, and I've directed them towards the website and to contact their hub leaders.
Wonderful.
And, you know, the foundation of STEM in the critical thinking skills, I can tell you when I and all of my folks interface with people, I say, you know, if you have kids, you should be asking when you go to your PTA meetings and when you visit with the teachers, you should be saying, well, have we gone through the certification assessment yet? So they should be asking for it, whether they're parents or grandparents or nieces and nephews. If you want to be involved in your new students' opportunities from a very young age, you should be asking about it yourself. And we always try to encourage teachers and to go through the process just so they understand what the world is outside of the classroom for application. And it's interesting. As I said, many times the students are the ones that are dragging the educational folks through that technology pipeline because they see it and do it all the time in their life compared to 2 or 3 generations difference, between that student and their teacher, perhaps. So it's a great opportunity to test your own skills. I mean, I would say to each of you in the room, I know Jeff has done this, and I have too, but I would challenge you all to go through the certification process. It costs you nothing to do it, and to just see where are you at in that process. So we all are a function of where we've been in life. And it's always good to know where we're at in today's world, especially if we're trying to improve that world in the future.
How would somebody go through that process?
All they have to do is call my office, and I can go through give you all a user ID and password. You can go through the training process if you'd like to first, but we have testing, events, and certification opportunities up on our website all the time. So you can plan your day around it or your week around it in all of the communities throughout Iowa. And that's the real benefit, is if you haven't gone through it yourself, these assessments are updated all the time. In process are 3 to 5 new questions all the time that businesses have given us to make sure the certification process is current. And it's a resume builder for younger people who need that on their resume. It's also probably a tiebreaker with some places. We just installed a huge process with the Des Moines Police Department so that incoming people, before they go into the police academy, know they have to have certain skills in order to be successful in the police academy to go through that process. So we're trying to really give the opportunity at no cost to everybody, as long as you have a primary residence in the state of Iowa.
And Jeff talked about the 9 scale-up programs. The goal is to reach over 100,000 kids this year. And not all of them are going to go into a STEM profession like we've been talking about, but just at least to get some exposure to it, I think is a huge thing. And just one anecdotal thing that I talked to the STEM Advisory Council about last week. I was a judge on the Technology Association of Iowa's Women of Innovation Awards, and that's to STEM-related accomplishment for women in the state. And one of the categories is high school level. So there were just amazing stories about young women and what they've done during their high school careers related to STEM. Several of them pointed out scale-up programs that they were involved in as one of the motivators for why they did what they did. So I mean, those are real-life examples of those. And now as we get more years, we're going to have more and more of those real-life examples.
There's a remarkable, I'll call it a thirst that we've tapped into with this STEM program. And we hear it anecdotally constantly in our office, teachers and more often students who are craving the STEM programming. So there's a great need. There's a strangely trickling delivery system at the moment through STEM. But I would love to circle back to teachers, especially mathematics teachers on the NCRC. I devoted a Friday in September to it. And a math teacher who would take that test cannot go teach math the same afterwards. It cannot any longer be abstract story problems about trains leaving Chicago. It's going to be square footage of carpeting and the solutions to scheduling at the local hospital. It's a fantastic game changer.
Yeah, I'd like to see it as a requirement of our, especially of UNI, which is our main great resource for teachers and training teachers. Because it is so impactful, because each one of those graduates touch so many people in their lives in their education process. All the students, they touch all the students. I mean, and so if our teachers don't get it, then the likelihood of our students getting it is not high. So it's really a game changer, I think, in its difficult self-assessment, because everyone thinks they're going to score at the highest and you don't. But that's okay, because it tells you where you are and it allows you to move forward after that.
So we talked a lot about education in K-12 and getting those programs in those schools. Could you maybe put in perspective a little bit of what's the term length of this problem? Is it a longer term problem, or are there things that need to be done right now to bridge the gap in what's happening still right now in the state?
There's such a big gap. it's got to happen on many fronts. You know, I think the STEM is important because systemically, that's where we're going to get it. But we got shortages now. You know, I can't speak to the other, but to technology, there are openings right now that can't be filled because there aren't qualified people. So I think we have to have programs that are broad. You know, for example, internship programs. You know, it used to be not long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, it was only a few companies, Principal and many of the smaller technology companies that had internship programs for technology students. Now most do, and we just don't have a big enough pool. So we need to do something to expand the pool, you know, not only from Iowa, but also to attract students from outside of Iowa. We had an internship program at Principal last year for IT. Had 76 interns, 40 different schools, 14 different states. And we did that because we were really confident our jobs would sell themselves, but also that Des Moines would sell itself. And it did. You know, we're able to turn many of those into permanent, you know, employment opportunities because they came here, they liked the work, and they liked the social amenities that were available in Des Moines. So I think it's, you know, it's got to be at the, you know, the college and university level. We have to get more systemic coming out of the K through 12, but we got to do things now to attract people because we got shortages now.
We have to grow the population. And we have historically not been doing well with growing the population. We're a fairly slow growth state. And when you look at the world and then you eventually get to Iowa, it's we have to do things to attract population. And of course, the population you want to attract. And so one new initiative that is building on Skilled Iowa, that is building on STEM, is the governor's new initiative on Home Base Iowa with veterans from all over the country, not just here. And soon you will start seeing that marketing roll out. We want to attract every single one of that population in the next 4 years. We know that the statistics would say that there's probably 500,000 people leaving the services in the next 4 years because of the drawdowns and the budget situations. And so that's a population we believe is important to Iowa. And not only the Iowa vets, but all of them. We want as many as we can. So we're going to roll out a national marketing campaign starting in January. And of course, embedded in that, for the person that might be interested, we've already gotten, just before the marketing have even started, stories that are tremendous about coming to Iowa, you know, people from Virginia or San Diego or wherever. We know, to your point, we know once we get them here, we can make a sell. We're pretty good marketers once we get them on our home turf. But so we have a lot of programs that are incentives for people to come and check out jobs, because we know that people leaving the service, one of their first concerns is a job, because the unemployment rate with service members is really quite high. And we have the jobs. And so we know that's a base of people that have the right skill sets, that can learn our different kinds of areas that we need, no matter what the sector is in the economy. And they're the kind of population everybody would love to have. And so this initiative will really be gaining a lot of steam in the next 6 to 12 months. And hopefully that's one area that we can target, and we purposefully targeted it at a national perspective to get them here, you know, somehow. So any kind of ideas of population growth is what Iowa really needs to focus on.
You guys are hitting on one of our next power markets is actually going to be the talent gap and the talent war. And, what you're talking about, companies they're trying to get the best and brightest,
Right.
and if there's a shortage right now, and especially because Iowa's unemployment rate is so low.
Right.
But the partnerships really matter, and I think that's represented here. You know, as a small liberal arts college, we're very active in the Greater Des Moines Partnership. We're active in the Governor's STEM initiative. Many things that we try to participate in. So we have 20,000 alumni. 10,000 of them right now live in Iowa. Others did previously, and careers took them on other pathways. But we work to be a net importer over time.
Right.
You know, that we can draw students in from outside
and get larger numbers of them to be here. But it's the partnership that matters. It's the fact that I know that I can bring students to Des Moines, and there's going to be people here to welcome them and provide internship opportunities and to get them connected here, as well as the industries and the other communities that surround in this region. So there are real possibilities that exist because of how we work together. And having come into Iowa 4 years ago from Massachusetts, what I can say is Iowa is uniquely capable. It's a unique skill set to partner and leverage the synergies that I have never seen in another place that I have been. That people are invited to the table, who work together, who try to accomplish similar things and reinforce each other's success. So I can be present at something from the college standpoint, as industry leaders can, as the government can, as those who are leading special initiatives can, to make it all work together. And I think that's where the success can come from.
We got about 10 minutes or so left, and I know one of the questions I always like to just ask is what some of the roadblocks are that can either slow the growth in this area or halt it. And curious what you guys think could be some hurdles.
If I may start, I think about challenges, not necessarily roadblocks. Sure. I think, as Mark points out, we are uniquely positioned. There's an extremely special thing happening in our state. As I confab with my peers in other states, we really seem to be leading by a number of measures. But we still have our challenges. I think messaging, to your point, Teresa, is still critical. We have a broad constituency of Iowa that may not understand the urgency and the imperative of STEM for our economic well-being, as well as the well-being of people's own children. So we have a messaging, marketing campaign need, and ironically, that's rolling out. I think next week we'll debut a new campaign initiative with a public awareness partner here from West Des Moines. Aside from messaging, I think one of the other key points was touched upon here, and that's teacher preparation. We can offer summer camps and after-school enrichment and teacher professional development until we're blue, but ultimately we need to solve this at its source, and that's probably at the pipeline level, where we turn out our teachers, each of whom may teach 40 years, thousands of children each by the time they're finished. And if we can get to that source, from my biological perspective, it's almost the stem cells that can change all other cells. So looking at teacher prep, I think, is going to become a priority of the council, and there's a couple of things bubbling, thanks to efforts of people around this room, that will probably put a positive stamp on teacher preparation in STEM for the next years out.
I would say one of the challenges we have is change. Iowa is very rich in tradition, and we have a great tradition, and so we're very proud of that. And as the governor says, people always like the result of change, but liking change itself is difficult for us. And I found that out in just trying to roll out technology into government, into all of the people that we touch. And so we have to, I think, create an appetite for change, because truly that's the way of everybody's lifestyle into the future, no matter what kind of a job you're in, what kind of a industry you pick, whether you work or don't work outside of the home. It's all about change. And so that has to be an okay topic for us. And so I think one of our challenges as Iowans is to embrace change, especially in the fields that matter so dearly to us for future growth and future economic success.
Yeah, I really feel a need to say, but we have huge momentum. You know, I think the STEM initiative has brought out, as Jeff said, industry, educators, government, all coming together to say we recognize this is a key issue to our state. So I don't want to leave without saying we do. And then, you know, the fact that our industries that are really dependent upon STEM have huge growth: financial services, advanced manufacturing, biosciences, technology. I mean, they all do. The one challenge that I really want to get out on the table is that in the STEM area, and especially in technology, over half of our population are not choosing to pursue, even think about it, and that's women, Hispanics, and African Americans. They make up well over half of those that are considering college, and certainly over half of those that graduate from college, and they are way underrepresented in the STEM fields. And so that's a challenge. How do we get early to people, that come from the underrepresented groups to say there are great jobs out there, but you have to take this curriculum while you're in middle school. You have to have math foundations in middle school and high school, and many of them aren't getting that. So that's a huge challenge that I think we really need to address.
Is there anything being done to address that right now?
Well, I think there's lots of things. Certainly the scale-up programs, there's aims at that. Many of the universities and some of the colleges I know have targeted, Women Engineering Day. And companies like Principal, I'm sure Kim and others, participate in those. And we bring great role models. We have 4 divisional chief information officers at Principal. 2 of them are women. They're great role models to be able to out and say, there are great opportunities here. So I think there are starts. It's just way too small at this point to really address the issue.
We're developing an economic empowerment for women rollout of using the theory, and I think it's a good one since I'm a woman, is that usually women who are in touch with themselves and the world like to spend money on things, and they like to have some economic independence. And so even in today's workforce, we have an issue with women and economic empowerment. And so we're going to roll out some special events this next week or this next year that really just focus on that particular issue to kind of wake up that feeling inside of young women and medium-aged women and older women like myself who can really do something about their own economic empowerment. And so that's one thing. I know that there's probably several others throughout the state, but I agree with everything you've said. We do have some significantly utilized people.
I think it was Warren Buffett's quote about women being the most underutilized portion of our
It is.
society.
That's correct. That's correct.
The biggest opportunity. I think maybe you said it a bit better as the biggest opportunity for
Right. Right.
I want to make sure, this is a question I'd like to get everybody's feedback on. What happens if the current STEM initiative in Iowa does not work? And not to say that it's not working, because all signs point to a lot of positive momentum. But what if we don't solve this issue?
I suppose you're back to the apocalyptic view of the world. First of all, I think Iowa is resilient among its many good qualities. And so my bet is, as I have viewed the initiatives that we've undertaken, that conversations about renewal are already there, about sustaining progress, about finding new ways to do things. And so if this is viewed as a singular moment in time, then we have failed. But if we have done something that becomes systemic, to Gary's earlier point, that really can become ingrained in the culture, ingrained in teacher preparation, ingrained in the school systems, so we don't see it as an initiative, which it is presently, because we are initiating something, but that it becomes permanent. Because I think we are kidding ourselves if we believe that we can throw time, energy, and money at something for a few years and find success. I don't think that is achievable at any level.
Melissa?
Sure. The first thing that popped into my mind was, when you started speaking, was our first meeting of the advisory council where instructions were given out about ideas and that it had to be sustainable. That was one of the key elements of everything that we were doing, that it had to be sustainable. So, and to answer your question, I don't think I can. I don't think it will fail. I think that the efforts have been placed so that these do become systemic and sustainable, and they will penetrate into our society at the family level, hopefully at the teacher level, where they need to be to continue it long term, and so that it's self-replicating over and over and it just becomes the norm.
We obviously don't like the premise of your question. Failing that none of us see that as an
And I
alternative.
understand why.
You know, I would say, I'll use a real life example. So I chair a group of large companies, chief information officers in the state. And many of them are hedging their bets right now because they can't get the workforce they need. And so they're establishing satellites in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. They're outsourcing to other parts of the country because they're concerned about workforce issues and that sort of thing. And if we're not successful in a sustainable, STEM workforce, development kind of program, there's going to be more of that. So companies, even if they choose to continue to do business in the state, they're going to have to be moving outside the state, which to Teresa's earlier point, that's not going to be a way to attract people into the state. It's going to be the opposite. So I think STEM is one of the really fundamental issues for how we can grow the state population with great jobs. Like from the technology field, the study that was done this year showed that the average wages in an IT job is 50% higher than the average wage overall. So these are good, jobs, well-paying jobs that we can attract here, but if we don't do it, they're going to go outside because there's demand everywhere.
Teresa?
Well, to add a new thought, I agree with obviously the fact that I don't believe it has an opportunity to fail, number one. But number two, I think that we have to be really conscious of how we refer to the opportunity we have. It's not a program. A program usually has a beginning and an end. And I work very hard in our shop to make sure that people call this an initiative. It's an embedded culture change that we have to make. And that is why we went into high schools, because it is an embedded culture change that we are making. But our language is very important. I'd like us to use the word career more than a job. I don't think you can attract somebody for a job. I think you have to attract population for a lifetime. And in that is built the thought of career. And so one of the changes that we have to also experience ourselves is how we refer to the opportunities within the state. That's all part of the marketing throughout the country and the nation of attracting people to the opportunity of a career and a lifestyle right here instead of a job.
Well, if I may bring up the rear on this one, failure is not an option.
No.
However, it is an intense competition. There are over 40 U.S. states with some version of a STEM initiative for all the same reasons we're doing it. It's an international movement. In fact, in February, we host a contingent from Japan who would like to replicate some aspects of Iowa's STEM initiative in their nation. So it's an intense competition, and I suppose the victors will succeed in bolstering or fueling a talent pipeline of innovators, translating into economic vitality for our industries. The losers will not.
It'll be quite obvious.
Yeah.
I was thinking it's kind of like I think the light bulb is a good idea. It's just when you have an initiative like the STEM initiative and you have a beacon and it's something formal saying this is an issue that we need to talk about and figure out. Well, then you get business journalists that write stories about it and the registrars that write stories.
Right, the momentum.
But you can't have that if without that initiative. I don't know. Ultimately, what you want the light bulb to do is go on in every individual in the family, like you were saying.
Forever.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Jeff, I've actually got a story that I wrote about 2 years ago when you first started doing things with this initiative, and your quote was, "The pressure is significant, it is now or never." Do you still feel that way?
I do. I think that was coaching from a previous co-chair, President Ben Allen at UNI, who compared this to Iowa's Manhattan Project. And he was very good at applying the pressure, and it helped all of us be stronger and better. And we still have excellent pressure appliers throughout the council, as well as its leadership that keeps us on our toes.
I think we're just about out of time. Scott, you want to ask your final question then?
Absolutely. Yes, the final question we have here is, what are your closing thoughts and what's a final takeaway that you'd have for our audience on the subject of STEM? And anybody feel free to jump in at any points.
I'll do something very brief, and that is to acknowledge the council's leadership, the Lieutenant Governor, Mary Andrea of Vermeer, the council itself, and the Iowa legislature. We would not be where we are without a bipartisan, visionary legislature that I hope embraces the long vision. Thank you.
I would say, let's all make a commitment to think of the STEM initiative on that 50,000-foot level rather than focus on the silos of the S, the T, the E, and the M. They are important to get to the bigger thought, but we must focus on the bigger thought in everything that we do, because that's what will embed it in our culture.
Yeah, I probably have said this before, but I don't think there's one answer to our STEM workforce issue. We have to address it on multiple fronts. We have to build a systemic pipeline coming out of our K through 12, I think, and it has to be systemic. It can't be a short-term basis, but we have to address the now issues too. And I think there are ways to deal with that, to increase the pipeline, the pool of people, because one thing that we've experienced, and I can speak from the technology side, is we're all sort of competing for the same people, so they're just moving from company to company. That's not solving our problem. We have to increase the pool, and that has to happen at the same time we're building a systemic, answer for the future.
Any thoughts from this end of the table?
Yeah, my last thought would be to encourage businesses to start working with their local communities more, get acquainted with their education systems, and to start working with them a lot closer. I think Chris touched on it before, and my interactions with students and my own experience has taught me that I don't know what I can do until someone shows me what the opportunities are. And the teachers, even though we have a great externship program that Jeff developed and is leading, they don't have all the answers. And so having the businesses is key to getting this initiative really embedded into the lives of everyone. And it doesn't take a lot of time, it doesn't take a lot of money, it just takes one person.
Mark, you get the closing thought.
Well, we can do this, I think, because we're together. And from my perspective, it is about the possibility of a shared vision that we have all set in front of us. This is happening not because someone was compelled, though I think we were all persuaded, not because anyone was threatened, though I think we feel the threat of society generally, but because people are committed. And as long as we are committed together across all the sectors that make Iowa great, then we will succeed.
The last thing I just want to throw out there is just if people are looking to be involved in any way, they want to learn more, is there one place we can send our audience to get some help?
iowastem.gov.
All right.
Skillediowa.org.
2 places. Anybody else? Well, that'll do it for us and to our audience. I want to thank you for joining us. If this spurred story ideas for you, or you want to talk with myself or Kyle on either STEM or any topic, I'm going to make it so our contact information shows up on the screen there, so feel free to reach out to us. And lastly, I just want to thank all of you for participating and helping us understand STEM and what all you guys are working on. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.